Alrighty, I call to order the Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee meeting for June 21st, 2024. As the chair of the committee, I'll do as we do each time and start by going around the room, introducing ourselves, and then at the end, we'll end with Rob, who will tell you how to chime in from home. Let's start with Ms. Davis.
Thanks, Phyllis Davis, Board's Administrative Assistant.
Jennifer Wagner, Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer.
Kevin Ashley, Director of Financial Reporting and Transparency. Michael Gustin, Assistant Treasurer.
Dr. Moffitt, board member.
Brandon Craig, board member.
Shauna Murphy, interim superintendent.
Good morning, Cody Hutchins, contract analyst.
Good morning, Joseph Porter, Accounting Operations Manager.
Good morning, Emily Bell, Ask Me, Local 232.
Good morning, Lauren Roberts, Chief Audit Executive.
And then
Good morning, Rob Wilson, technician. If you'd like to speak during the speaking of the public session at the end of the meeting, please click the hand icon. We will ask you for your name and association to the district, and we'll invite you to speak at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Have a good day.
Alrighty. So, and our goal always to beat Mike Morosky and the policy committee. We're gonna do it one day, y'all. I'm telling y'all. Oh, it's been online now? Oh, okay. Great. And we have Ben Lindy on the virtual space there. But yes, in our effort to always constantly beat Mike Morosky's policy committee, we're gonna dive right in.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, Ben. First point topic under old business, which is the only thing under old business, is our budget update. I don't know that there is any significant budget update since Monday.
Only that the budget task force is meeting directly after this meeting to dig deeper.
Alrighty. Cool. So the quicker we get done, the quicker we get to that meeting. Perfect. Next thing up is the draft annual appropriations. Again, we go through this part before we take it up to the main board, which will be on Monday's meeting, I'm assuming. Right. Treasurer Wagner, you want to take it away here?
Yes, I'll turn it over to Kevin in just a second, but you should have copies in front of you. So there's two appropriations resolutions to review. The final one for the year to close out, and that has to be filed, but with Hamilton County by June the 30th, but we have to get it to them by the 26th, I believe. And then the resolution to help us get started during the new year. This is the board's way of authorizing the treasurer to spend money. So until that resolution is passed, I can't cut the first paycheck or the first vendor check. And it's organized by fund. So you appropriate at the fund level rather than at the lower detail level. And it's simply next year, we did about half of the budget for the general fund, but all the other funds are at our estimated annual allocations. And it's some of them are still estimates because we haven't received our allocation notifications from ODEW yet. Do you want to add anything to it?
We estimated carryover on the grants as well. I think in the past, we waited for carryover and then appropriated those dollars. We usually get those allocations in like November. Or
Sometimes January, and then by the time they get reappropriated, when they give us, if they give us a carryover, say $3 million in title, the board has to appropriate that money before we can spend it. So once you appropriate, we can build the budgets, and then by the time we get around to getting it all submitted into the CCIP and getting an approval, it's almost the end of the year and we can't spend it. So what we're doing is using our best information to forecast what those carryovers will be, appropriate them now as estimates so that we can start planning and spend our money more effectively and efficiently. And then we may have to come back and revise some of those as more information comes, but thank you for reminding me.
Yes. And the only other thing kind of separate from that is the treasurer's report for Monday. Do you want to highlight that as well?
Yeah, so there's a table in the treasurer's report that's called advances. If you remember, this is a once a year deal where the general fund has to advance money, cash, to any state or federal fund that has a negative balance because it's waiting for a reimbursement from the state. So we spend the money first. Once we close the month, we submit to ODE through a project cash request form. Then they reimburse us. It takes about 2 weeks. So this is just a temporary movement of money, but in order to transfer money between funds, I need board approval to do so.
All righty. So are there any questions about what we're doing with our appropriation? Perhaps?
Just to clarify, this is, like I had a question. I looked at you and then I lost my question.
My beauty.
That really bad. Oh my gosh, I had my question. So this is when you talk about the needing the permission to spend the money. I'm really asking this question more for the public than for
Sure.
myself because I understand it. But this is for the year. This is not just for the time during the 90-day.
Correct. So the 90-day appropriation is a little misleading because you have 90 days to approve your final appropriation. It's not 90 days worth of spend.
Right.
Right. And so we just took the budget. We're at least gonna have a budget of $300 million. So that's what we start. So we can get all the annual contracts through. Instead of the first time we did this, we did try to do 90 days of appropriation and people were trying to get contracts in for just 90 days, but then they were forgetting to amend them. And we started creating a whole bunch of then and nows. And so for the big ones, in the annualized ones, we're trying to get them to go ahead and put your value in, knowing that that's what we're going to do. And it's not at risk of being cut, but I mean, if we have to modify a purchase order, we can do that too.
I got you.
So thank you.
And I also just want to clarify when people see this huge number at the bottom of the page under grand total, that is inclusive of general fund and all funds,
All
not
funds.
just,
Mhm.
so don't see that number and say, oh, they don't need money. Absolutely, we do. But I just wanted to clarify that this is really everything, not
Right.
just.
So the general fund, the $300 million one is used for general operations of the district. That's the budget that we're working on now. All other funds have a specific purpose and you can't spend outside that purpose.
And when you all talk about kind of advancing doing it a little different this year, that you're advancing the money based on an estimation of what that spend will be rather than to just, I guess, go with actual. Am I
So-
understanding that right?
The advances are related to the fiscal year end close,
Okay,
not the appropriations for next year.
Okay.
So at the end of the year, we're not allowed to have any fund, grant, state or federal grant or any fund end in a deficit cash situation.
Okay.
So the general fund transfers money into that fund to make them whole. And then on July 2nd, we'll just turn around and reverse that cash.
Okay.
Until the reimbursements come in and do it themselves. But
gotcha.
that's just one of the audit checks and they just don't want anybody operating in a cash deficit.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
I really wanted that to be clarified just for the public.
Sure.
More than me,
Right.
but.
And we'll
I've
explain
asked
it
that
again
que-
Monday night too.
Yeah. I've asked this question 100 times and I think I get it, but I want to make sure that people understand as we talk about closing our gap budget, we're probably confusing people a little bit, but I want to make sure that they understand that's not the big number. That is a big number, but that is inclusive of everything. And some of those funds are restricted.
Right. So as of Monday night, we were still $9 million away from balancing our general fund budget.
Thank you.
And I think, what's kind of helpful to know about this process, which is one of the things that we continue to keep doing every year, is that, we have to both budget out what we've spent and make sure that we can align with what the actual numbers show. So from what we've budgeted each year, what we want to spend and what we've tasked people to spend to what they actually spent, we have to close that out. So we can't just simply leave that in a vacuum.
So yes, exactly. So this is a tool that Hamilton County uses we have to fill out what's called a certificate of estimated resources. So it's where they certify that we have the right financial resources to support what we're spending. And so it's another external check on that.
And I think it's a helpful thing to know, but I think it also goes back to some of the stuff we talk about in audit committee as well, but it's really showing that we are effectively using the dollars that we've been allocated, right? So when we think about how we even build our budget and how we go through and determine what cuts are going to be made, what things that need to be done, it's all about getting to a point of showing we're good stewards of the dollars that have been handed to us. and also that we need more, but that we're good stewards of the dollars that have been given to us both by our local community through local tax dollars as well as through the states, even though the state should give more, as we always keep saying. So I think, again, it's a lot of hard work to get to the end of the year to figure out where we are and make the necessary changes. And I appreciate all the work that you all have been doing to do so. The only other question I would have on this is, so we approved both of these at the Monday meeting, correct?
Correct.
All righty. Any other questions? Well, let's keep it moving along here.
Okay, so then Kevin's gonna walk us through the May financial reports.
So, as always on the third slide, it's kind of a summary. So we like to do that. If someone picks this up and doesn't hear the presentation, they can go to that and see what the highlights are, but I'll just start on the graphs on page 5. So this one is actually one of the newer graphs. I forgot to put that little, oh, you took those off. I guess they're not newer anymore. That's yeah, we changed the layout. So but this one is cash and investment balances for all funds. So again, this is looking at the bank and investment side as opposed to the governmental fund side. So you can see the blue is the operating cash at 54 million, Star Ohio 64.9 million, longer term investments, which are managed through Red Tree Investments, is 76.9, and then debt related is 37.1, which is mostly sinking funds for what we would call balloon payments that will come due on those issues. So the grand total 233.3 million. The next, you'll see that number later. The next slide is just the US Bank general operating account. And as we talked about, just kind of a visual representation of the peaks and valleys of our general account. With the Star Ohio account, we can kind of manage that. Currently, we have a little bit of a balance there that makes that easier. You'll see the green is the current year. May being, the most recent we're talking about. You can see a little uptick there. Talk about that as we go through the revenues. The next slide is looking at it from a fund balance standpoint. The general fund at that point had 111.2 million. That will go down through June, and then in July we should start getting property tax advances again. But that's where we were at the end of May. Debt service holds about $76 million. The internal service funds, which is the payout of benefits and that type of thing that flow through those funds. Student dining. You'll see, as Jen mentioned earlier, state and federal grants at the end of May were awaiting about $10 million in reimbursements. And we're projecting the advances that are on Monday night about 13 million. We actually did receive our May revenues, but then we'll have additional amounts that were paid out in June that we'll be waiting on. And there again is the 233.3 million total. 2 slides will be the general fund cash balance and encumbrances. On the right is the current year. You can see there is an increase. And looking at the revenues that led to that. One, we got the TIF revenues from the city a little early and they were a little higher, which was helpful. CRAs, I think that revenue came in a little earlier for a couple reasons. One, we billed a little bit earlier. And secondly, most of them are set up for auto pay. So we're getting that a little faster than we were in the past. Encumbrances are down a little bit, so we feel good about that. That some progress continue to be made there and getting those either paid out or closed. The next slide is a 3-year history of cash balance just for the general fund. Again, you can see the peaks and valleys mainly related to when we get our property taxes. But again, that little hook at the end for green We hope it keeps going that way. We like those. Next slide is the 3-year revenue by source. The key information here is the 2 bars on the right. So that's current year revenue is the 3rd bar, and then current year budget or estimated revenue is the 4th bar. The dash line would be if we did not have to do the tax anticipation notes this year. So just to give you comparisons there. One of the things we were happy about here, the percentage of annual budgeted revenue, we were at 99.2% of revenue already at the end of May. So we're actually, for 2 reasons, the larger TIF and the property tax reappraisal bump in revenue is actually going to put us over 100% of what we estimated for the year. Next slide. Flip the right direction. Again, just showing revenue by month with the tax anticipation note blip in there. Next slide is accumulated for each month. So just showing how we grew through the whole year. The dash line would be without the tax anticipation note, but you can see in total that those revenues still are outpacing the last 3 years.
So Kevin, before you move on, the one slide back with regards to the month by month, is the increase in May kind of something we were expecting as it continued?
Again, I think had the TIF money come in June, you wouldn't see as much of a blip. So I think it'll come down in June. Does it make sense? So because I was looking at that the other day, adding the May and June from last year to see, okay, and I could definitely see higher in May. So I'm anticipating a little bit less in June. The things we know we're going to we get catastrophic cost, which is about 1.8 million. We just received that. We get 2 state foundation payments in June, but we don't get any property taxes. So again, it's positive, but I think June will kind of temper it a little
We
bit.
won't duplicate in May. It'll be a small in June.
No, and that's what I was, and what I was kind of wondering is if, we see a kind of a trend starting really April, a little bit higher than some past years. May's a little bit more higher than some past years, and I'm assuming June will be back down. But are we kind of expecting that trend of being a little bit above previous years' monthly revenue?
Yes, our property tax revenues are higher than in previous years. Yes,
But we won't see any of those in June.
correct.
Property tax. Yeah.
But year over year, yes, you're going to see a trend. The next year's line will probably be higher than this year's.
Good to know.
I feel like we're always trying to project the timing of what's going to come before June 30th and what's going to come in July. That's one of the struggles I feel like with the forecast is timing. And you say, oh, we're going to get catastrophic cost in June. Like, okay, make sure we get those in June because I'm anticipating those. So timing is an issue sometimes in terms of that forecasting. Okay, we'll go back to, was I on 12 or 13? Okay. So again, the overall trend is up, you can see there. Next slide is 14. This is a comparison on expenditures. Again, the 2 bars on the right, you can see the totals there. So we've spent 624 versus our budget of 702, which is the working budget. So keep in mind the working budget includes encumbrances from the prior year budget that carried over and then we were able to spend out this year. Compared to last year, if you take out the tax anticipation note, you can see it's fairly consistent with last year, which is I think a positive thing given that, there are certain things that have increased, COLAs, et cetera. But just comparatively, we're at about 89% of spend with 1 month to go.
I'd like to make a point here. So if you look at fiscal year 23 through May and fiscal year 24 through May, the dark blue block is salaries and benefits. So as that size goes up, it squeezes down the non-personnel stuff. So contracted services and supplies and that kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Okay. Next slide. again, similar perspective showing the expenditures by month. And as we pointed out before, the thing that's a little tricky with this one is some months have a 3 payrolls in that month. So obviously for that month, expenditures are going to be higher. The months where we have debt payments, those are in there as well, December and June. So again, just to kind of give some perspective there. Next page is showing, or next slide is showing same trend with expenditures, fairly on track compared to prior years. Next slide is the unallocated relating to the general fund. We did do a breakdown there of the working budget. So the original budget was 609.9. The tax anticipation repayment, the 16.5 million carryover, which as of right now, we have $20 million open encumbrances. So that likely, that was at the end of May. We've made some payments in June, so that number will be less as we get to June. The unencumbered balance is 1.5%. So those are things that are non-encumbered, but were budgeted in the original budget. So would likely be some sort of a carryover. Next slide, which is consistent with prior years, so it's not an additional funding amount. Next slide is one that Mike will go over real quick with cash flow.
So as always, it's good when Kevin's ending number and my ending number match. So it gives us some confidence. But same sort of theme. This is one of the months we actually came out ahead. We had more revenue than expenses in this month. So a lot of things we talked about. A big one was getting the state homestead and rollback payments for the taxes. So, and taxpayers get a rollback and the state reimburses us for that. So that came in, that was, $14 million in revenue. And then some other stuff. Kevin mentioned TIF payments, CRAs, as well as we got a Medicaid reimbursement from, I think, 21-22. So it takes a while for these things to work through the system, but they're nice checks when we get them.
It's $3.8 million, so it's a nice chunk, but it relates back to the 22 school year.
It's very hard to know what was really done back then, but it's nice to have.
Is that consistently 2 years behind? Okay, so could we anticipate?
We
what-
do.
Okay.
Every year in the forecast, we do. Yep.
It's in the
Good thinking.
forecast. Just,
Okay, I think alike.
yeah, I think there's a set of things in the forecast. I think Kevin kind of alludes to it that are like these little things we check off, like, oh, catastrophic cost, yay. Oh, Medicaid reimbursement, they're in there.
And E-rates are reimbursed.
E-rate.
As well.
We finally, yeah, and that kind of got stuck for about a month or so. And so there was so we got that flowing again.
I think that also speaks to the challenge that we have with operating, right? In some ways, you're operating in constant space of we do this first, and then someday somebody pays us back for it. For a lot of whether it's grants, whether it's other things, Medicaid reimbursements or whatever else, there might be part of that. And so it also speaks to one of the things that I think you all have been really championing and was talking about earlier, which is the cash on hand balance. That this is why this is so important, is that if we don't have the revenue to do this stuff up front, then you can't do it, right? And like that's another part of how we operate as a district. And I know it was one of the concerns at the beginning, or concerns last year, was we were getting low, right? And so then it means that certain other things have to either not be done or be done at a later time where it costs more or those other things. So the fact that we have to wait 2 years, 2 years to get reimbursed on something shows you that sometimes it's also about the cash on hand, really. What can you actually do, even if you have to wait for the dollar?
All right, so the next couple slides are the preschool slides. And I know to tout the town hall last week, they had a good discussion about
2
preschool.
days ago.
Yeah.
Oh, was the last? Oh, last Tuesday. By the way, this has been a long week.
Kevin thought Wednesday was a weekend. It's okay.
Felt like it.
It was a Saturday for me too. Like it was.
But anyway, so I tried to tout it. I just,
It's okay, at least you acknowledge.
yes, exactly.
And how many views do we have, Dr. Moffett?
I will say, at the end of that, I went on my Facebook, we had 453 views at the end of it. So I'm
Nice.
sure it's better now.
Yeah, that
We'll
was
get that
awesome.
report.
Nice.
Rocking.
Awesome. So the key thing you'll see here at the bottom, the historical comparison. So in May of this year, over 1,000 kids were received some benefit through the tuition assistance versus we were at 991 last year and 889 the year before. So it's again a positive trend there. The next slide kind of shows like an income statement of that monies and how it is separated. And so you'll see 15.6 is what it received in tax revenue, approximately $15 million, the allocation. You can see tuition assistance was calculated at 7.2 million. This far into the year, 8.9 million is what was paid to United Way, the trusted provider there, which is used by CPP. Special education support. We do have a question with early childhood, and actually they didn't get a response on that just yet. I think they anticipated having an additional diagnostic team, and that's maybe why there's a difference
I
there.
don't know if they just didn't fill it or is the payroll coding hasn't been updated yet. So we're looking into whether it's properly coded, but I was pretty sure they did add a diagnostic team.
Yeah, so we may have an adjustment to do that before we close out the year.
Just one quick thing, and I know like the next slide is also still on the same topic around students, but I think this is an opening part to the conversation that we ultimately will have to have pretty soon here, which is what is our decision as a district about what we seek in the renewal? Because I know we made a great effort, and I appreciate all the great effort that was done to get to a master agreement. But the struggle really is that the costs, in theory, but us getting to the master agreement is really to deal with the costs that we have in our budget. But that doesn't really mean that we don't have more students here, right? And so, like, in some ways, we have to make a decision as to whether or not we want to continue the expansion efforts to assist more students, or if we want to stay within where we are at the 15 million or whatever, 15,500,000 or wherever, some range in that, that we have as far as revenue from the tax rate. And so I think that is something from our levy perspective that we need to have that conversation start soon, so that we have time to make whatever changes we want to do to whatever levy we're going to put forth. Yeah.
So we spent, I would definitely urge the public, my colleagues, to watch the Just Ask Jim, because we spent more than a few minutes talking about the expenses, the increased enrollment, and the decisions, the upcoming decisions that definitely have to be made. But there's so much justification around the benefit of 3 and 4-year-olds getting preschool education. And Preschool Promise did a great job of sharing their results. Vera on our side did a great job of sharing our results. And we are educating more students, clearly by the numbers, but it's having a benefit. They have the data around students being able to go into kindergarten ready and prepared. I have a question for you all around CPP. Preschool Promise is the last dollar in. We talked about that. My question, and they answered it, but I don't remember if we did. They get Head Start and other grants first. We
do. They don't.
Oh.
They get Job and Family Services
Okay.
voucher, childcare vouchers and stuff like that.
And then there was another agency that they said they got. It was 2. I don't
Yeah.
remember the other one. Was
I don't remember the other one either, but we do. We have about 5 or 6 different grants that we tap into.
Okay.
So there's Head Start, there's Early Childhood, Title I, IDEA B. Seems like there was another one. Before we use the $15 million.
Okay, that's what I was wondering about. Do we have a breakdown of like how many of our students, how much on average we're giving for our portion of the other grants? Do we calculate that? Like one student might qualify for 3 other things that are covering that, and then CPP comes in last.
I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say 13 or 33 million. There's a 3 in there, but I can't remember off the top of my head, so don't quote me. But we can certainly come back and share the whole picture
Okay.
of all the other funds as well.
I was just thinking about that for the next one, because that was some of the questions people asked about that. And then also very poignant to point out, and we talked about this during the Just Ask Jen, is that we do not get paid for preschool students except for if they have students with disabilities.
Right.
but they don't count towards our numbers.
And the state foundation formula does
Correct.
not fund regular ed preschool or what Ms. Brooks calls the typicals. They do fund preschool students with disabilities, and I think we have about 280, 300 student, 3 and 4 year olds with disabilities. So we do get some funding for them, but not the regular ed.
Okay.
We're educating over 2,000 3 and 4 year olds right now.
I just thought that was point to point out that we need
Yes.
to get that school funding formula to include them because that would help us tremendously.
And then the last slide in that section was just the total number compared this year and the last 3 years, green being the current year. And so that's all I have in that section.
So one of the things, and again, we'll talk about this a little bit later too, in some of our future meetings around kind of levies that we have coming up and that kind of stuff. But I do think it is important to note that the cost of the students in a class in preschool is not just the cost of the tuition or that end of it too. It's the having a body in the room to work with the students. It's having the facilities from our end of the deal, I should say, from the CPS end of the deal. It's the whole picture. And I think in a lot of ways, that's something as we think about programming over the future. You know, we've got areas of the city where it's a preschool desert, not because there's not preschools there, but because there's no seats in the spaces, right? Right. Because we have so many more kids who want to be a part of our programming. And to the point that Treasurer just made, if we expanded access to that, where it may not get assistance, tuition assistance, but just may open up seats, it still has to be paid for from somewhere, and the state ain't offering nothing for them. So I think that's one of the things we always have to be thinking about as we look at ways that we grow the district, because there's absolutely a desire. I tell you one area, like for instance, Hyde Park is a funny area where they want more preschool because they need more preschool because of the number of students, but they also are less likely to qualify for any of the tuition needs. So it's something where we would have to find some way to support the entirety of the program, whether it's through them paying for
Right.
tuition or what.
So the problem is that both organizations have grown their preschool, expanded their preschool beyond, in terms of the high quality seats, beyond the vision. So, Vera did share some good results in terms of kindergarten readiness. My fear is if this levy doesn't pass or we don't expand it, then Cincinnati Preschool Promise may not survive as an entity, because we are 90% of their income. You know, this levy represents probably 90% of their revenue. So if that doesn't pass, then we're going to have a lot of what we used to call preschool deserts.
Yeah.
And now they're called preschool gaps, I think she said. Yeah.
Yeah.
So both entities are working very closely together, not in competition, but to help cover all those areas of gap and need. But it'll be a challenge. I mean, we'll survive as an organization because, you know, K-12 will help, but it'll be a challenge.
And the recognition again is that the more we are able to get kids in the pre-K, the more they're ready for kindergarten ready, which also means we have more kindergarten students. I think we talked at the last board meeting. The expansion of kindergarten means the expansion of first grade, which means the expansion of second and third and all the way up. And so it's really thinking about a longer term plan as we talk about what we do in the short term. Great conversations to have. All righty. So I think next on is our state and federal grants.
Grants time. Next slide, Rob. All right, so this is kind of the as of May 31st summary. We're 11 months through the 15-month cycle. Goal is to spend at this point about 62% of what we have. You can see there between, we just kind of break it out between public school grants and non-public school grants. So those are the auxiliaries out there that we work with. Doing pretty well overall, I would say. And Rob, if you go to the next slide, you can see it on the graphical. I think this is really a nice representation. You can see how the dark bar is FY24. You can see we're trending above. We've stayed above for a while, so that's good. Like we're trending in the right direction. We're well above either the last 2 years. So, and it's just a lot of hard work. There's no shortcuts to it. It's a lot of phone calls. It's a lot of meeting with budget owners. It's a lot of tracking people down. It's a lot of, hey, did you get this rec in? Did you get this amendment in? How's this extended time coming along? Do we have all the people where they need to be? So there's no shortcuts to it.
So, just a shout out to the whole grants team. There's 5 of them. They manage 31 different grants and they all have their own rules. They're all compliance reporting stuff. And it's $75 million. So it's a very complex world they live in. And they're always in a position to have to say no. So, or no, but let's do it this way. So, just wanted to give a good shout out to the grants team.
Yeah, they are a small but mighty team.
Yes.
So definitely. If you go to the next slide, Rob. So this is kind of the title summary. Again, just to point out, if you look at original, we're doing really well. We've got some 98, 96% there, 120 for Title II. So we've done really well spending the current allocation. As you can see, though, we did have a lot of carryover this year. We've mentioned this before. Like you look at Title IV, for example. We actually had more in carry. We actually carried over more into this year than we received this year. So that makes it tough, especially when you officially get your carryover in February or March. To spend that all, but there's plans in place. We're working through things. Overall, things look pretty good. So I know there's been a lot of conversations, even, Superintendent Murphy and Deputy Smith, like 2 days into the job, we were talking about grants, right? We were having meetings about grants. So they hit the ground running, and that's a huge support for the grants team. Next slide, Rob. Oh, go ahead.
If we could go back to that slide.
Yep.
I know that board member Morosky brought this up a couple meetings ago around our huge immigrant population that's anticipated. And Title III looks like it is specifically for that population. Can you talk about, and this would be for the finance side and the admin side, Superintendent Murphy. Can you talk about any future plans to increase that spend when we know that there is going to be a huge influx coming? Are we putting things in place now to address the needs of that population so that hopefully that can be like a 90% spend? I'm sure that we can do it, but can we talk about that particular fund in particular?
I'm excited to share. You will recall, I have already been charged from the board with reimagining what services we're providing to the ELL population. And so we are working with that leadership team, a group of teachers, Dr. Hall and Student Services partnering with me. We had the beginning of a plan. I'm hoping to be able to share that during the July board meeting.
If I can just say from the financial side, these Title III generally spends out pretty well.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of it's in salaries. And so it's a couple things is to think about is any of these things where you don't see spend, remember, you still have all of June salaries, and anyone who is like a teacher is going to level pay. So you're going to get July and half of August too to spend. And like some of the immigrant stuff also, there's usually traditionally a pretty big summer program that also gets pulled in. So they spend a little more in the summer, but this is generally one that we don't have a lot of concerns with spending.
Okay. And one more question. I know, I don't know if it's a financial or an admin question, but Project Connect had a position. I thought that was dealing something like this. Or yeah, I know we can use salaries. I've understood that now for title money. Can some of that money be offset for our homeless ESOL students and families?
All of Rebecca Beach's staff are state or federally funded. There's only one in the general fund. It's a counselor, I believe. And that would make it a supplant because we fund counselors across the district from the general fund.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out the size of this Title III. Title III immigrant would be like one teacher.
Yeah.
And I've lost track of how many immigrant students that we have. I know we've grown our ESL population. I don't know about I know the immigrant population's grown. I just don't know how much it is.
I can get the number.
Okay. But
Okay.
yeah, so that would help if federal government would help fund it.
Well, that's what
Yep.
the board should be working with is legislation around that piece. But I just know that we've spoken about that multiple times, that we
Yeah.
know that is coming. So I
Right.
feel like in anticipation
Mhm.
for future preparation,
Mhm.
what could we do? What are we, it sounds like we're already planning to spend and prepare, but we could probably do more with more money. For sure.
Yeah, I think Rebecca's team in loss of those ESSER dollars, we were able to make some shifts using title money this past year, her working with Nan and team, et cetera. I
Okay,
think
thank
they're in
you.
a good place with staff right now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Which is a good segue to Esther. Rob, if you go to the next slide. Perfect, thank you. So we're slow.
96%
Yeah.
spent.
There you go.
We're slowly we're slow as every month we talk about the boxes coming together. They're really close. So we'll, at some point soon, we'll probably just drop this graph altogether from our slide presentation. Yeah, so Rob, you go to the next slide. There are the numbers. Not a lot. I did quickly just glance today, just to give you guys an update, because it's, a couple weeks later. So if you're curious about encumbrances, we're at about 18.2 now. So we went down about 2 million from this report. Out of that 18 encumbered, 13 of that's facilities projects. So they're finishing through. Transportation's about 1 million. Resource coordinators, similarly, there's about 1 million that's just paying those contracts out. And then the nursing contract, there's about 1 million left on that. And that's your significant encumbrances. And then your available unencumbered, as of right now, is about 7.9 million. And again, we still have, summer salaries and some other things to pay out. So
That's available. You said that's available unencumbered.
that's unencumbered, yeah.
So 5 million of that already has a plan.
Yeah.
Because we took the I keep saying capital, the technology lease payment that was gonna be in fiscal year 25 general fund, we're gonna use this money to spend down. So,
There's the other thing that's big in that amount is the indirect cost. So in our budget, we pulled indirect costs to offset other stuff. We just haven't done those entries yet. That's something you do kind of after you get through June. That's about 1.5 million too.
So it's important to remember, like, the numbers that we're seeing on the screen here are as of the end of May, right? And so, our meeting doesn't happen on June 1st. So other stuff gets paid out. I think one of the other things that is, I know we've heard this a couple of times, but that the planned completion of our facilities work is on target, be done on time, which is,
Yes.
I can tell you right now, it's much better than what UC does, and we don't finish nothing on time.
You guys have
We
the
just
most
keep starting new
experience.
stuff again, right?
You guys should be experienced in this.
Yeah. But it's good to hear that those things are being done on time. I know one of the big concerns that was raised throughout the country with ESSER dollars when they were used for construction or for work within a building is that you could not finish you couldn't get all of your bills for the work that was being done, right? Because there was a number of places where, essentially were delayed because of all the other construction reasons, and then get your POs in time to be paid out was a challenge that some districts, especially some of the smaller districts, were facing. Because again, they can't pay out the dollars.
I don't have the cash flow to do that, right?
So they're trying to take bits and pieces of it and put it in different spaces. And so I think when we heard about the projects and we were, recognizing this is what we're going to spend ESSER dollars on, I think it was a great work to be done to keep us on path to get the work done on time. Again, that is not something that normal government entities do. So I think we should praise it when it gets done. But keep going.
And then the final slide for grants is just the pie chart. Just gives you a pie chart of the previous slide. So if there are no grants questions, we'll turn it over to Cody.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. All right. Portion, we're going to talk about the continued ROI in regards to per pupil breakdown of particular programs. For this one, we chose to do the Schedule E payments and the athletic trainers that are provided throughout the district that are contracted services. So you can go to the next slide, Rob. And before I start, I would like to say thank you to the athletic department and huge shout out to them, especially Josh Harden, Brent Langhorn, and Mark Herman. They were great in collecting the data. Josh has been available even as of this morning for phone calls to get things rolling. So he's like, "Are you good?" Checking on me if I need anything. So wonderful support there. So what we did here, first slide is the per pupil cost for high school students who participated in sports. You can see this data is titled for 2022-2023 school year. So that would be last year. And the reason for that is they're still finalizing their FY24 participation numbers to make sure that those are accurate and up to date. And that was honestly the first spot where we noticed some improvement area. So quality improvement ideas that Josh has around the process of collecting the participation data to make sure maybe students aren't double counted, that all students are accounted for, to really give us that accurate data. So him and I have been talking and throwing around ideas, and I think there's some future QI work coming from that. And Josh was confident that that would be a good area to work for. Let's see. Just wanted to-
Excuse me, Cody, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Just so, for everybody's edification, this is only Schedule E payments, not the total cost of running a sport. So it doesn't include facility rentals, uniforms, officials, that stuff. It's just the coaches' payments.
Thank you, Jen. And also right here, I just have the 10 highest per pupil costs based on sport for the high schools. There is a link for the full list of everything that I had for the data available, but just for time purposes and presentation purposes, putting 100 different sports on here might not have been easy to read for everybody. So we'll go to the next one, Rob. So this is the same thing, same idea, Schedule E payments per pupil cost based on the number of students in the high schools in 2023 who participated in either clubs or fine art programs. And you can see the downward shift there of the per pupil cost for these typical programs is a little lower. As you can see through some of the data that is on the spreadsheet that's attached, there's higher number of participants in the fine arts programs like marching band or steel drum. Those are usually typically a little higher than a basketball team. And also it plays into the fact for the per pupil cost. Josh and I were working through and talking through something like basketball has a higher per pupil cost because of the number of students that are required per coach. So looking through those, and I'll mention that on my conclusion slide, just coming up with a clear defined idea of looking at the equitable distribution of how many students or athletes per coach in each program or club advisor. So
I have a question for
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
Cody. When I look at this, I love it. Absolutely love it. But it gives a different representation because every school does not have a Black Culture Club. So I'm kind of confused. When I look at this to say it's $149, how many schools have that? Is that an average of, like, if 3 schools have it, is that the average amount per school versus all of the schools that have a newspaper club, that is their number? So
common.
I guess my point is it possible just to add to this, not take away at all, but to add some further information? I understand it's per pupil cost, but how many pupils are being served? How many schools? And you can make it either, hey, 3 schools combined are 100 students, so it's that number, but just make it indicative of what the relative cost is per, I'm thinking for the district, if we are running a yearbook club and only 5 schools have that, that's not really, it's a great fee, it's a great cost, but it doesn't tell me how much we're spending for that.
Absolutely.
If you understand.
Makes total sense.
So I was thinking about that with regard to the previous slide. Can you go back one slide, please, Rob? When we think about football is typically an expensive sport, period. But if 16 schools have football, is that what's the average? Like Oilers football team might have 20 students versus Withrows has 45. I'm just thinking, is there a way to look at that representative of schools and in relation to their population?
Absolutely.
So that we can just disseminate it a little bit more.
Yes, ma'am. That data is available and I can definitely put that
Maybe
together.
it was. I
Yes.
just wanted to give you
Absolutely.
what I was thinking when I saw that.
That's a
Like,
great-
how many schools have
point.
gymnastics? I don't know, but it's a great thing, but it's expensive. So it might be okay relative to that particular school's budget.
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the challenges with Schedule E though, is that schools somewhat dictate what those prices are. So a school that really wants to invest in clubs and organization, or a school that doesn't have sports may have more money dedicated to clubs. School that has a bunch of sports may dedicate a little bit more, well, not that much more, but may dedicate a little bit more to athletics and less when they have clubs. And I think that's one of the challenges with some of our schools that have 150 clubs is that they need an advisor for each club. And so what the amount is to be an advisor gets divvied out of a pool that doesn't always match up to per pupil dollar Schedule E. So I think that is a challenge that that is one of the things that we have to also be thinking about when we think about Schedule E, is how does a school use the funds? Because to Dr. Moffitt's point, if you have a school that has 20 clubs and one of those clubs is Black Culture Club, they may spend a different amount than a school that has 100 clubs and one club is Black Culture Club, or a school that has 4 clubs and one club is Black Culture Club, because that potentially shifts how they decide to use that funds. And I think that is just one of the weird challenges that we have in the system. I don't know if Shauna, you want to speak a little bit to that point, or
Oh, I just wanted to also clarify, I kind of like the big picture. I know you guys are already working on this, but for me, when I look at, the reason why I'm asking for this question is a school that has X number of students, do they have partners? Can those partners supplement that? So that's what I'm looking for when I see, okay, well, if 3 schools have Black Culture Club, maybe the UC Department of African American Studies can kind of supplement that. So I was looking at it from a perspective of how is it that we could offset that with potential partnerships or with potential organizations that could supplement that if Schedule E has to go away or has to be decreased. So that's kind of broad picture for me, what I'm looking for when I'm asking that data.
This is rich conversation. I just happen, I wonder why, to know Beautiful Bulldogs is at Woodward, right? And Meridian 8 is the jazz ensemble choir at SCPA. So yeah, exactly. And so I think at the school level, some of the pieces they deal with, you have X a pot of money and you have X a student interest. You have dance club. No, I just want majorette. And so ILTs have to come together and figure out what are we even able to offer. And then what will the student participation be like? Are there 2 people interested in chess club today? Those kinds of things. So all of it is important. And when you look at equity, we want to be able to provide what kids are asking for. And we want to be able to provide adults who can monitor all of those activities as well. Really good conversations.
So I'm anticipating that at one of your meetings, just to just put that on a slide for me with more detail. This is great.
Absolutely.
But just build upon that so that we can see where gaps are and address those gaps, perhaps with additional funding. Because Schedule E was such a huge contingent last year. And I know it's all around money, but in order for us to be equitable, how can we offset?
Absolutely.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that was a wonderful point, wonderful conversation. It gets me thinking further because like a lot of these, of course, the first thing I sit down and I work with Jen and she's like, what conclusions did you draw or what are you thinking? So hearing that kind of conversation takes my brain a little further on how I can better my processes going forward too. So thank you for that.
And I think the next 2 slides you have coming up actually speak a little bit to this.
I was just waiting. All right. So this next slide, as we were kind of talking about participation percentages, I still want to note this is still at the high schools and still for FY23. And really, the big notes here are things to consider, things like SCPA and Walnut. You can obviously see that there's area for improvement on the participation numbers and double counting or counting a student multiple times. You might have little Timmy that over at SCPA that is in 4 clubs. So he's making those numbers grow and he's maybe also over and playing basketball. So just an opportunity there to better collect the data, but I just wanted to really show in this graph the sport and club participation at each school and really just where those numbers lie. And you can see the average for both was about 44 and I think club was 43. It's just kind of mixed in there. So around the next slide. So of course, looking at the percentages, I wanted to look at the numbers, just a different way to represent the data at this point in FY23. What the enrollment was at those schools, and then roughly the number of students that participated in either high school, club, fine art, or both. So
And to the last slide, I think this accentuates the point you were making on the last slide, which is that if you have 4,000 students
Mhm.
that's participating in a club or fine art group, like what we're having is about 1,000 students doing
Right.
multiple things, and so there's a way to track to the individual student what their specific clubs or organizations is a little bit differently than like how many students are engaged in a sport or club,
Mhm.
and then maybe what's the average number of sports and clubs that a student's engaged in a school.
What would be really cool is if we tie it to their like test scores to see like,
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
you are speaking my language.
Put it on our one pager.
But I think that,
Regional ROI.
but I think that gets to, we talked about the whole child as part of one of our goals or one of our guardrails, I should say. And that is speaking to the idea that schools where we see the connection to the students participating more, they're involved in more clubs and organizations or more sports.
Mhm.
How does that translate into their performance in the classroom, which we presume to mean that they in general will do better.
Mhm.
We don't always have the data in front of us to show it. So
And to kind of chime in on that on the whole child idea, it might be a little harder, but what is that social emotional impact or that mental health impact on students who are participating in sports or clubs? For me, sports and gym are like my outlet. So I can imagine like when I was in school, I always looked forward to practice. Going to class was hard, but practice made me happy. So I was there. I had to get good grades to stay on the team. So. All right, next slide, Mr. Rob. So what we're going to be looking at is the athletic trainer per pupil cost as of May for FY 2024. So there's a few caveats in here, but I'll hit the data the best I can. We had three major vendors: Walton Mobile, Tri-Health, and Mercy Health. This first slide shows all the high schools that had a athletic trainer in which we paid for, and you can see year to date for this year total cost $470,000 roughly, and then you can see the per pupil cost over there based on what I did here was I took the participating student athletes, so got that data again from athletics, roughly how many students participated in sports across those schools in which an athletic trainer is used, and kind of divided out for per pupil cost there, and kind of thinking it through with Jen and the team and reviewing these reports. There might be an opportunity here to look at encounter data, kind of similarly how we did with nurses, and see how many students or student athletes that those athletic trainers are encountering and actually working with versus how many students are participating in sports. So I think there's a little more data dive here available, and I will be working on that going forward. So yes, ma'am.
What's the average cost been for this over, I would say like the past 5, well, maybe pre-COVID? Are we spending pretty much roughly around the same for athletic training, or has it gone up? And I understand some of it is just gonna have to go up, but I'm wondering, it's 470,000, let's just say 500,000, is that pretty consistent across the board in relationship to per people, for the students? Historically?
So I unfortunately don't have that data on top of my head, but maybe Ms. Murphy.
I can give kind of a real high level. So 3 years ago, we had a grant through Children's Hospital that went away, and thus a tad bit of trying to get back to that level of service through funding from the district. There will be some of that for the upcoming school year, but not quite to the level it had been. Thus, we had Walton Mobile step in the last couple of years to support being present at games and practices for that reason only. So we're not where we were, but we are working to get back to where we are at more of an expense for the district. Does that sound about right,
Yeah,
Jen?
so 3 years ago, we didn't pay anything for athletic trainers. I think Withrow was the only one who paid for their own. That was a school choice. But when that grant dried up and everybody started backing out, we were forced to fund it, and we funded it through ESSER, and now it's gonna hit the general fund.
Okay. And it was, at the time that we funded it, that was for all schools or select schools? Or was
Some
it
of the
just these-
schools have grants. Some of the schools do. So Taft has a grant through, I want to
Mercy
say it's
Cincinnati.
through Mercy Health. And they're continuing to work on that piece. Walnut has a separate little situation going on, but the others, Mercy Health, Walton Mobile, I hope I'm getting this right. I know Walton Mobile for sure. We've been paying through ESSER
Okay,
only
can you
recently.
Put that slide back up, please.
What's the next slide? The one with
What
the,
I'm asking for is the slide that we just had up. I wanted to ask another question about that one.
Go back to.
So I'm wondering though, I'm just wondering, is there room for, because we don't have Mercy on here. So. is there-
Mercy's with Taft.
Mercy's
And
on the next
Euler.
page.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
it's on the next page. So I'm just wondering, is there room for more? More
Trainers,
yes.
we need more
More
trainers.
Trainers, is there room for improvement in here? Is
We,
that
we
we're
need
limited?
more trainers. Children's ideal would be 1-to-1. What we have proposed is 6 schools for next year with children's shared. So 3 trainers at least. We believe we'll be able to get to 2 from children's for next year. So yes, so ideal, every school would have their own. Actually, they have more than that when you consider the games and the practices, et cetera, et cetera. So
And then one last question. Did you find, or do you see that there is any possibility of having that be like part of our internship program with our students? Because they used to do that at Withrow a
So,
long time ago, where
yeah.
the students were actually training with the trainers to be trainers.
Mhm.
So
So-
can maybe fill that gap.
So Withrow and Woodward used to have a sports medicine program working on athletic trainers. If you look at the number of trainers coming out of even University of Cincinnati, it's smaller and smaller pool, similar to teaching.
Mhm.
So yes, we're trying. We would like to get back to that. Finding someone to do that work and want to be a career and technical education trainer is interesting, but we continue to try to look at that as an option.
I was just wondering, since that is,
Yes.
I know that's a deficit, we don't have that, a lot of, they said that there was a need for that. So I was wondering if we could maybe look at that pipeline
Mhm.
for our students. So thank you.
I know part of the struggle with this also is that I remember when we talked about in budget and finance 2 years, I think it was 2.5 years ago, when we were trying to figure out the athletic trainer situation. We had an approximate agreement with children's, but because it's so volatile in the marketplace to get an athletic trainer, that when you don't have one at the time that they are looking for a position, they'll find another position pretty quickly. And so that's a large part of what happened with our children's folks, is that they found they found jobs because there's need in the market. Everybody needs, like you were saying, there's just fewer people who are going into the field. There's more need in the field for safety and security. And some places are paying great amount of money for athletic trainers. But I do know we used to use, as part of those resources, whether it's through children's or wherever, they were also using some of the folks who were within the college programs as athletic trainers also. And I think that's something, again, thinking about building pipelines in that kind of world, if we can make sure that we are, as we're doing these things and we'll continue to work on it. I know it's a really hard job. I remember being at some of the games where you sit and watch and have, a nurse or someone else there because it was who we could find available at the time to do that work. It's a challenge, but this is another area where we can think about how do we as a district maybe prepare that next person to come back to our district to work, right? And so let's keep it. I know we kind of started to talk about the next slide there, so maybe if you want to
So I'll just
go on there, Cody.
absolutely. I'll briefly highlight this one because thank you, Superintendent Murphy talked about a few of these already. But this slide here shows these schools that have an athletic trainer in which we do not pay for, and then the reasons why in that cost column. So you can see, like already mentioned, Euler, Riverview, and Spencer. They were part of a grant that was awarded, that CPS and the athletics department were awarded back in the summer of 2022 or 2021 through the University of Connecticut and the Corey Stringer Foundation. However, that was a 3-year grant that ends this year. And the caveat to it is the same schools, if I'm using Josh's words right. So Josh, if you're on, because I know he talked about it, correct me if I'm wrong. But those particular schools cannot receive that funding again from that grant because they've already got it. So it's a one-time deal. I'm not sure if there's options to use that grant at other schools and flip the funding or how that works. That's something to work out with Mr. Harden. But just wanted to mention that those 3 schools for those athletic trainers would be coming over and need funding for in FY25. So let's see here. And then another note to add on here, you can see the number of students for Walnut was TBD, but that number actually was updated as of this morning, 1168. So 1,168 students for Walnut. And I did my math right on the 2 pages. It was about 4,500 students across sports. So next 2 slides are my last 2 or 3. This is just a breakdown of the chart that I just showed. It was to be the first one, the athletic trainers in which we pay for. I didn't put the schools on here that we didn't pay for because obviously theirs would be 0. So in order not to skew what the graphic is representing, just putting those on there just in a graphical fashion. Next slide, Mr. Rob. And then we've kind of talked about these as we went through, but I'll just highlight them again. So just thinking about when doing these programs and doing this work, what I'm noticing is like the per pupil cost and looking at it, people are starting to adopt that process and starting to think of what ways and how we can come up with that data, or when we're working through, like when I was working through with Josh and Brent, noticing an area for quality improvement need and pointing that out. So it's kind of cool to see things come full circle, that we're talking about QI here. We talk about QI and Impact U, and it's starting to spread like wildfire. People are realizing, hey, let's try this. It works. So let's see. We talked about the athletic trainers so year-over-year participation analysis. I think Dr. Moffat, you kind of mentioned that already. So jump forward. We talked about the rules around numbers per student for each sport. And then thanks, Jen, for mentioning this, but developing a way of calculating the true cost of each sport. So like she mentioned earlier, that was just Schedule E payment. So what does swimming look like if you got Schedule E? You got the pool rent, you got the transportation to get there, the uniforms for it. And I think that would be really cool to put on our 1-pager one day. So if you want to see, hey, I want my kid to go here and participate in this sport, this is what we're looking at. This is what it costs the district. So. And then last slide. So I know July is talk about other things. So next session I had on my calendar was August for school social workers of attendance and reviewing those. So,
Thanks, Cody.
my pleasure. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Cody. That's a lot of work. And I know I ask a lot of questions of you all, but I think that when we finally get this before Jen retires, when we finally get this big thing, I don't think it's going to be 1 page, maybe 1 page per school. I think it's just going to be so robust and information. We'll be able to find out where our gaps are. We'll be able to plug partners in and say, you know what, hey, at this school, we have a deficit of 2,500.
Absolutely.
So I think people really do want to see what the cost is in totality. We're there, we have it. You're putting it all together. So I'm super excited.
Every time we do this analysis, it just drives more and more questions. I'm actually enjoying the work a lot. And Cody's doing a great job putting it together and collaborating with each of the member departments or partners that we have to make sure that we're doing good reporting.
Well, you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
So, and Cody, I think one of the things that will be helpful for us in the future years as we think about Schedule E and some of the other things is recognition that while Schedule E for some schools is mostly athletics and for some schools it's mostly clubs, the division of what you get Schedule E for is is determined by something that is not necessarily under our control at times at schools. And I think that is the other struggle that we are going to see, is that if you have, for instance, a team of 12 people as a basketball team who you have to do Schedule E for, you have to put all these costs in per person for them having practice, equipment, and all these other things. And then you have a football team of 70. Like how do we give guidance on how to value and make those decisions with the school level? Because I think that's the other struggle, is that you can't expand clubs by taking a smaller portion of the pool, right? Like there are some schools that don't use all of their Schedule E money, but for a school that is, who wants to add another club, wants to add another organization, wants to add another activity, there is a real question of how to do so in an equitable way. That doesn't mean that everybody has to take a smaller portion of the same pot, but also may mean that you may not be able to have 700 sponsored clubs at a school of 700 people. Right? So that is the challenge that I think we're thinking about there.
I would love to share. I think our athletic team is doing a really great job of adding and growing athletics and activities. especially in the elementary world.
Mhm.
So as kids get into some of the sports and activities, as they matriculate to high school, they have some experience and are a little better able to compete, quite frankly. So that's one place. Another place is sometimes schools don't spend all of their allocation. And if there's something another school would really like to do, we will repurpose. This is not a lot of money.
Yeah.
But we have done that in the past.
I'll just add, I think we can even reimagine having, if they don't spend all their money, having maybe some of their students join another school in partnership. And I think of lacrosse, as far as like Walnut, Withrow, and I think Clark students get together and they have a lacrosse team because there wasn't enough interest in one school. So maybe we could even give you all the energy that you need to look and see where those gaps are, that schools are not spending their money, and then perhaps fill those in with things like an esports. Esports was unheard of 5 years ago. Now that is, they can get college money for esports. So maybe there's not enough at one particular school, but there could be 5 schools that come together within a corridor, and they get together and they share transportation, but they share that cost. So maybe we just need to reimagine that too. I want to give you all everything that you have that you need to do that, so that our kids can fit.
Just want to make sure, and I understand that's just an example. We do have esports.
Yes.
Okay, I just, okay,
Yes,
okay,
yes,
okay.
Well,
for sure.
and I know Josh and ABC has worked on that with a few things. I think it was either baseball or softball or something where they did a collaborative team. The struggle is always that sometimes every school wants to have their own. And so, school has 8 students come out for basketball. The real answer should be probably that you should be partnering with someone else to build a fuller team of players. The school, and again, I think this is where we have some ownership in the schools, right? We allow them to kind of dictate some of that space, to your point of having the ILC make some of those conversations be done. Let's all do it collaboratively. Like, let's have that more open conversation going forward so that we can do some partnerships in some sports where absolutely it makes sense to build a couple schools together, bring schools together to compete. The only other point to this, and I think this is one that if Dan was here probably would say, is that the recognition from the Ohio Athletics Association or whatever, I think is tied to the school itself. But
So Josh wants me to remind everyone, and some of you sports fans probably know this. Hi, Josh. That the OSHA rules don't allow for sports to combine. In some cases, we can do it at a club level, but not for sports.
Yeah.
So just,
We love you, Josh.
Yes, thank you, Josh, for that reminder.
I appreciate Josh
I
for
was
this
thinking
again.
of the club level.
Yeah.
I know lacrosse was a specific example. Maybe that was considered a club. I'm not exactly sure. I just want us to be as creative as we can so that our kids benefit, the majority of our kids benefit, and that we bring partners in to help us supplement where we need to. That was just the gist of that.
Yep.
But thanks to everybody.
Yeah, I know Josh and the team are hard at work and clearly are watching our meetings. So that
They were asking what time I'd be on and everything. He didn't want to miss the data. I was like, hey, you're welcome to show up. Come on out.
Josh loves coming to this meeting. All righty, next on our agenda.
Our QI report.
Yeah.
You want to introduce it, Mike?
Sure. So we skipped last month, but we're back with our QI team report out. So always exciting to see, some other folks talk about it. So this month we're talking about PNC compliance. I think everyone in this room has at least 1 or 2 conversations about PNC compliance. Anyone who's been through an audit committee or cycle has talked about it or otherwise. So we're all laughing, but but the good news is, we have a team working on making things better, and I'm gonna let Joseph Porter take it and talk about his team's work.
It's Joe's return to the meeting here. All right, big stage.
Thank you. All right. So I'll read the problem statement, and then after that I'll ad lib. So procurement cards by their nature are vulnerable to misuse and fraud. Timely reconciliation of charges help to mitigate some of the risk, and also dealing with compliance for Ohio law as well as federal law and board policies. And another important part is when charges are fully reconciled, we recognize the expenses in the proper funds and accounts and update the status of the associated purchase orders. Having statements reconciled quickly allows us to better manage our budgets, including state and federal grants.
It keeps Jan out of jail.
Yes. And I won't spend too much time here. We have a lot of team members. Carol is the SME for all things PNC. She is a subject matter expert. She is the PNC guru. So she has been very, very helpful in this process. She lives in PNC, but we've expanded the team, added a lot of different departments, including like student services, curriculum, principals, secretaries. I mean, it's a large group. So we had to limit it to this number because we simply can't fit more people on this page. You can go forward.
So Carol is one person. She has over 293 credit card statements she reviews every month, assuming that they're all used in the same month, but it's a lot of work.
Yes. So our global aim is all PNC statements are submitted on time and include all required backup. And our smart aim is improve the current compliance of all PNC card holders. So our key drivers are in the middle. One focus on our interventions. So we tried a lot of different things, and you'll see a lot more once we get to the run chart. So escalation policy approved by ELT principals and the board. So thank you all. That has been very helpful. Also first time card holders being safe schools training required. P card module is going to be a big rollout, and I'll get to further in that once the run chart comes up. But the business card, business plus P card module is going to take our current PDSA to the next level because it's so much, my favorite word, automation involved in it.
So can you explain the different colors and the interventions and what they mean?
Yes. So white means that it is an idea, but it has not been tested yet. Green means it's actively being tested. And blue means that it has been tested several times. And there's been some positive feedback from it. So therefore, it's been adopted at that point once it has turned blue. So we have two PDSAs, which is Plan, Do, Study, Act, that have been adopted, and then we have 4 that are currently being actively tested. And another one, create PNC electronic dispute process with the purchasing team has gone well, and simplifying the tracking notifications with the PNC statements via Smartsheet starting in February. You'll also see that once we get to the run chart. And cross-training with the AR team has been a huge help. Like Jen mentioned, Carol's one person, and there's almost 300 card holders that are making purchases. So now the entire AR team has been trained on how to reconcile PNC statements. In addition to David Mina, that also helps. He's one of our senior accountants that helps out. And then also myself, I also have been trained by Carol to review PNC statements. So it's all hands on deck, which has been very helpful. And I know that Carol's very thankful that she's not the only one in PNC now. So share the burden. All right, Rob, you can go in. Thank you. So here's our run chart for PNC compliance. I apologize, I didn't put the annotations on there. So at the beginning of the year, August is right around the time that we started the QI process. And that's very early stage of QI process. So in the beginning, we pick out who the stakeholders are going to be. And then the next big part is develop a SFMEA process flow chart. So we'll look at the current process and, go ahead and map that out. And then the SFMEA takes it a step further, because then we'll start plotting, okay, these are the steps in our process. What are the failures? And we have a lot of failures, room for improvement, looking at it on the positive side. So a lot of room for improvement on there. And then once we get done with that, then we'll start same thing, looking at the same process flow chart. And then we'll start looking at possible interventions. What can we possibly do to help improve the current process? And then take it a step further. Is the current process working? If it's not, then maybe we need to develop a new process flow chart. So we've had a good amount of success. So like I said, we started QI in August, and, implementing some training, changing the way that communication is made via, for PNC, also helping Carol out. And another big time limit was the policy, I'm sorry, no, the escalation plan was implemented in February, which was huge. And it pushed a lot of responsibility back to cardholders and let people know, I mean, quite honestly, that, if you provide all of your information, your documentation, you'll be able to use your PNC card. If you don't comply, then you won't be able to use the PNC card. So
So can I just edify that we
Yes.
had an escalation plan prior to that? It was just a little bit too generous. And so this escalation was a little bit quicker reaction time, and accountability. So, you can see on the run chart that it's had already a positive effect.
And so, and additionally, once the escalation plan was implemented, or the new escalation plan was implemented, our PDSA that we started through Smartsheet to try to automate some of the communication, because like Jen said, Carol's dealing with 300 or so cardholders, and each one of them sends an initial email in the past. Here's my statement. And then Carol sends 150 emails back to say that, you sent me the statement, but I also need a purchase order. And then it goes back and forth. And before you know it, one statement is now 1,000 emails going back and forth. And then add phone calls to that as well. And then also IM chats, and it's all going to Carol. So Carol's buried in emails. So this helped us automate some of it. Now the request goes out an automated platform where they can upload their statements and send it back. And instead of, manually sending out emails, the emails go out. It's same thing, automation. And Rob, you can move forward. Thank you. And here the bar charts just shows some of our challenging areas and then also where they stand at. And you see the highest here is PO and APD not provided. And also I want to add APD, that's the professional development. It's also the most complex of the P card purchases. So there's a lot that goes into the APD. Is the APD approved? Is the purchase order approved? It's not just a requisition. It needs to be an approved purchase order. Do we have the PO number on there? Is the APD attached? When you flew for the APD, what airline did you use? What hotel did you stay at? What's the per diem amounts for the APD? The per diem may be $30 and you spent $32, which means you owe us $2. So there's a lot that goes into the APD. Statements are being submitted a lot faster now, which is good because the sooner that the statements come back to us, the more time that we have to work through the statement versus someone that submits it towards the end of the month doesn't give us much time to, work through the statement and let them know, if you forgot something, these are the additional documents that we need, or if we need more clarification with the documents that they did provide, just submit it early gives us a lot more time to work through it. Rob, you can move forward. And I forgot, are there any questions at this point or roll forward?
So just for the public's edification, that the non-compliance isn't about naughty purchases or non-compliance. It's just about the timeliness of submitting all the proper documentation. And so we continue to focus on that.
I want to give a special thanks since we have our leadership in here. Want to thank Treasurer Wagner because she leads by example for the department. She purchases something, you immediately have statements, receipts, and she'll come up and say, I owe you $5, here's $5. So we're squared away. And the same thing with interim superintendent Murphy. Yes. So same thing. She's, I owe you $3. Here's your $3. You have this wild PDSA that keeps sending me automated emails over and over and again, but I did attach it. So thank you. Thank you.
Funny story about that. On Wednesday, I was out, my son-in-law's mother was at my house helping me clean windows. And so I took her out to lunch. So we're sitting there having lunch and I whipped out my credit card and it came back and it was the PNC card. I'm like, I gave you the wrong card. Can you, and she's, well, can you reverse it? And she goes, well, I've already submitted it. I'm like, please, could you reverse it? She goes, I'm like, I'm gonna get in trouble at work. So she did, I gave her like a really big tip to take care of it, but I was like, it's so easy. It was we were kind of in a dark environment. I didn't realize I was pulling out the wrong card. We were just talking away. So it's easy to happen. It's just when it's a pattern, that's a problem. Sorry.
I think you know that Dr. Margaret's gonna ask about that then and now, like what's going on with these then and now?
Yes.
Keep going.
And so some of the key learnings that we learned, as well as next steps, clear and organized communication, including incoming and outgoing, are critical to the PNC reconciliation process. When dealing with large volume of documentation and electronic communication, enabling some automation can be a very helpful tool. Collaboration, open dialogue with a large pool of stakeholders, such as central office, schools, facilities, department, helps foster innovation and process improvement. And next steps, we're going to continue to reconcile statements from February forward through the Smart Sheet PDSA, which is a short-term solution. And we're also going to continue testing the P-card module within Business Plus and the financial technology team. Huge thanks to them as well, because like I said, theirs is much more robust platform for PNC. It's going to do a lot of things, and also eventually roll that out district-wide. And they're estimated spoke with Adam yesterday. He said they're about 90% done. So getting very, very close. And again, big thanks to the financial technology team and, Adam Gepner, if he's watching, big thanks. And then also Richard Becker as well. Richard pushed out some reports that previously didn't exist, and the turnaround time that he created them was very fast. Does this information exist in Business Plus? Yes. Okay, I'll get it for you. Just tell me what you need. And, we came back and the information that we needed wasn't exactly what we need. He said, okay, I can tweak a few things. 24 hours, he sent out another revision of it. So it was very fast, definitely team effort, what you see on the run chart. So
Great work. I think it's really cool that we are using more technology to make things more efficient and effective, because I do think it is also a time killer when you have to go back and look and see if you can find a receipt again, or see if you submitted the wrong receipt this time, or also the different factors that people might have been doing to, again, not do something wrong, but to do it just in the right way.
yeah, well, I realized once we started QI, when I looked at Carol Smith's inbox, that's when I realized, like, whoa, there has to be a better way. So yeah, a lot of improvement has been made through the QI testing.
Great work.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lauren.
And if I might just add on, at this upcoming Wednesday's audit committee, we will be reviewing the results of the fiscal 24 continuous auditing. And one of those 4 sub-projects are P cards. And I think it's a great way that we've been able to follow kind of right along with management as they've made these changes. Albeit we tested quarters 1 through 3, which means our testing concluded in March of 24. So I'll be very interested if we decide to pursue this further next year, that those will only continue improving. So I think it's a really nice dual approach that they're focused on things from a QI perspective, and then we're able to kind of follow behind objectively and independently to say, yes, things in fact are working as anticipated. So it's been a great partnership, and Jen and I were just talking the other day about how many years of work and progress, and things are really coming together. So it's been wonderful partnership, and kudos to the team who does the work.
Absolutely. And again, I love when we give shout outs to the folks who are in the trenches doing the work, because it's a great way to make sure that they get appreciated and valued for all their hard work. It's something we've generally done in budget and finance, and so I think it's something we glad to continue doing. But so on to our next topic here, which is the new leadership financial dashboard.
So this is a project that we tried to roll out this year, but faltered a little bit with the transition in superintendencies. So Mike's gonna actually drive it, because when I try to get on, they were in the process of updating Cognos, so I couldn't get into the dashboard. But so as soon as he pulls it up, but this is a tool that we plan to use to monitor financial transactions or in areas that could help drive improvement.
So Rob, it says host disabled screen sharing.
As you're doing that, so if you think about the dashboard in your car, there are indicators that tell you how fast you're going, what your gas is, level is. Whether your brake light comes on. And so there are quick early warnings of how are you performing? And so this is very small and I can't read it from here, but some of the data that we're measuring are some of the things that have come up in audits, like overtime usage. So where are those big hits happening? Things that we struggle with all the time then and now, so we can start digging down to what are the trends, where are the big hitters, and maybe we need to do some re-education, budget to actual, and so that we're monitoring our spending. It's all color coded and drillable. And the team that Joseph was giving kudos to, Adam and Richard, are the ones who, and Naima, who's now our financial systems designer, have helped do all the technology behind this. We just kind of want to do an unveiling as we start actually using the data to move forward. But next week is the audit committee. One of the updates they're going to be getting is on the overtime, right? And so this is one of those tools that we're using to address some of the overtime overspending. So I just want to do a quick sales pitch. That's all.
Awesome. I love when we're adding technology to make things work. I know the audit team has done that as well with bringing in dashboards so we can, real time get information on, and real time allow the team to get information on. Because I think that's the other hard part, is that sometimes one person has one bit of the information, the other person's got this bit of the information, and we all, people need both. So the other thing, and I think maybe the question that goes from this end is the forward facingness of some of this information. What's the kind of intention around that aspect of it? Because I know we talked about this a little bit with the audit team about certain things they'll see,
right,
and other things we get to see.
Well, so it's really threefold. One is to monitor our financial performance, right? And two is to look for areas where we might need some retraining or re-education, or maybe we missed educating to begin with. Because we are a decentralized system, we have a lot of people doing financial transactions that don't have financial background.
Mhm.
And so if we see that one particular school has a high level of this or that we can go back and say, hey, let's talk about that. But then it also gives us an opportunity, a measurable tool for accountability when all those other things have happened and we need to kind of jerk a chain a little bit. So, but it's a lot of data if you have to plug through it on paper or even on a screen. So we try to do it very visually and very interactively. So hopefully it'll help the organization move forward.
And it's a great way to, when you're having the conversations with a particular school or a department, to really be able to talk through some of the things with them to get them to better understand where they are at the time, right? It's a challenge to sit there and say to someone that, like, you've got so many hours extra of overtime, and everybody's thought process originally is, well, I needed it, right? And it may be true, but then you actually have the more advanced conversation of where your patterns, where these other factors that are involved in that you can do from a dashboard where you can have the information active.
The overtime is kind of a new issue for us because, in the past, we budget the schools on average salary, and then we're required to do a minimum amount of budgeting and overtime for certain bargaining units. And it's kind of the average salary, and the underspend on vacancies has kind of covered that. We've never really dug into that until I think it was an internal audit. I can't remember what triggered it, but when we started seeing some concerning trends. And a lot of it was due because we had such a large vacancy in custodians where they were doing double duty. I mean, they're working 20 hours away for, a period of time. But there's also still some other nuances that pop up. And so we just need to make sure that either maybe we use that data to better fund the overtime lines instead of just letting the averages take care of itself. Or maybe there's a staffing issue that we need to go take care of. So we're trying to use the data just to process improve.
Great. All right. Anything else on this one? It was great to have that introduced to us, and kind of as you're building it and growing with the use of it, we'll kind of keep adding it into the discussion for the committee.
I was gonna share the overtime stuff at audit committee, but I wanted the finance committee to see it.
Yeah.
first. So,
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, so the last things on their agenda are other business topics. Again, this is where I put all the stuff that either I need answers to or just letting folks know about. So the first one on there is the July meeting date. I am not available in July meeting date. However, as the treasurer and I looked at what our topics were, I don't know that we have, I mean, we can do our monthly financials, but I don't know that we have anything specifically to July that has to be done at that meeting. And so, again, curious from Dr. Moffitt and as well, Ben is here on the line as well, if we need to keep the July meeting date or if you all are okay with us taking a different, or not doing the July meeting. If we still need to keep a July meeting, we can just move it to a different day. But what are your thoughts?
If you all don't think we need a meeting, I'm fine. I love taking time off of my calendar and taking it back. So if you say no, I'm rolling with it.
Yeah, Brandon, I was actually under the impression that committees didn't meet in July.
Most of the time we set a date just in case. Every now and then there's a reason for us to meet. I think last year we actually did meet, or maybe not, but yeah. So we don't have anything that's on that list of stuff that we would be pressing to need a thing from the committee. So I'm happy to remove it from our.
Yeah, let's give people the time back is my bet.
Great. See, look, this consensus works here. All right. One of the things that we're going to talk about in August is just starting the process of thinking about our FY. Actually, it's probably FY 26.
yes.
Sorry. That is my fault completely. Our FY 26 budget calendar. Reason I want to start the conversation in August, we have a lot of stuff already on the August agenda, so I don't want us to get too deep into it, but I think it'd be a good idea to set some calendar dates as to when things need to really be discussed, talked about, so that we're prepared to do next year's budget. Because again, I think it's going to be another hard budget in an organized manner. That in line, then the September meeting would be probably the first meeting where we'll actually kind of start building thoughts around the budget, around what some of the priorities might be, what some of the things that are potential things we have to think about. That also will probably be after, around that time, we'll have completed balancing the budget at that point. And so we will, in theory, have learned of all the things that we need to be, that from this year, that we can then think about for next year. I think one of the points for me always is that no year's expenses ever become cheaper the next year. So I really wish, man, like if we could get like housing prices to go down for just a couple weeks for me to buy something, would be great. Just somebody wants to donate a house to some parents in our district, make it easier for them. But again, it's stuff we have to think about from building a budget. So we'll start in September with that. The other things that we have certain things, if you look at our work plan, we have certain things that are already scheduled to be discussed. But I think we always come with different topics and ideas that are worth having further discussion on. I know one of the topics that I think would be great for us to discuss that Board Member Lindy brought up was about kind of the changing populations within the city and how it affects the schools, and within those things, how it affects things like budgets. Again, I think that's probably a great conversation for us to have aligned with building the budget for next year, because like we know for a fact that the West Side, the population changes on the West Side have really grown the number of students in our schools, whereas other parts of the city, we are not seeing that growth. And so does that mean we have to think about how do we reallocate resources, to think about how do we reallocate programming so that we do it in a way that is both fiscally smart and maintains quality education for our students? So I think that's just another one of those topics that we can build in somehow into the discussion. I think Treasurer Wagner and I also talked through some of the things that I think we were seeing from some of the ROI reports that we were getting about areas where we can even get further information as to help make decisions on things. Because I think what we're seeing is that there's a lot of really good return in some spaces, and in some other spaces we got some questions, right? And so maybe taking some time to really build on additional questions of things that for whether it's for this year or for future years around additional kind of quality improvements. But Are there any people online who would love to speak to us today? No. So Josh didn't really chime in. He just watched. I got you, Josh. All right. Well, unless there's anything else.
I'm starting to think about next year's financial town hall topics. And so if you guys want to start thinking about them, and we'll start collecting a list and trying to get them scheduled out.
Nothing here, Brandon. Thank you.
All righty. Well, then for those of you all who will be tuning in and or attending Wednesday's committee meeting, see you all there. All right, and then Monday's special meeting. See you all there.